Hi there, and thank you for your interest in the ITIL Process Map. My name is Stefan Kempter, and today I'm going to introduce our reference process model for ITIL. What you're seeing here is a recorded version of the webinars we offer on our website. Obviously, you will not be able to ask any questions directly here in the video. But if you do have questions, you can always get in touch with us, or of course you can register for a live webinar. Before we begin, I'd also like to suggest that you watch this video in full screen mode at the highest resolution, because then you will be able to see all the details. And here's the agenda. It's actually quite simple. First, I'd like to very briefly introduce ourselves, and then I'm going to present the ITIL Process Map, a set of process diagrams and document templates for organizations that want to introduce ITIL-aligned processes. We'll take a look at how we can help you with getting certified against ISO 20000, and at the end I will summarize what our product includes. Now let's get started with the first slide, where I would like to introduce ourselves. Our company, ITIL Process Maps, is a small but highly specialized company based in Bavaria, in Germany. It is run by my wife and myself. You can see our pictures here. We started with the business on our own back in 2006, and before that we worked as IT managers and business consultants, which gave us a good combination of experiences for the business we run today. And that business is not actually a consulting business of the traditional sort. Instead, we provide service management or ITIL knowledge in the form of process models. I'm saying this because I want you to understand that what we provide is not meant to be merely a door opener for selling you additional services. It is really meant to be a product that stands on its own. A product that helps you with getting started with ITIL, because what you get is a lot of ITIL knowledge in an easily accessible format. We can say by now that the idea worked quite well. We have hundreds of customers all over the world. Many of them are small organizations that you will not know, but we also have big names on our customer list, like Microsoft, Siemens or Boeing. So we can say by now that things work quite well. And that's what I wanted to say about ourselves. Let's now take a look at the ITIL Process Map, but before we switch over to Visio, I would like to explain the basic principle behind our product. That principle is actually quite simple. We have process diagrams neatly arranged in 4 layers of detail in the form of a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, we have a top-level diagram depicting the ITIL service lifecycle. This top-level diagram is the main entry point into the process model, and from here we can follow hyperlinks to go down to the next levels of detail. And then as we go down to the next levels, we will find on level 2 a set of 5 diagrams, 1 diagram for each stage of the ITIL service lifecycle. For example, there is 1 diagram for service transition. Then from there we can go down to the 3rd level, where we have 24 diagrams for each ITIL main process. An example of an ITIL main process would be change management. And then we can go down once more to the lowest level of detail, to the sub-process level. Down there, we finally get to see single activities in swim lanes. So this is the basic principle behind our product. It's quite simple. We have process diagrams neatly arranged in 4 layers of detail. We start from a top-level diagram, and we use hyperlinks to go down to the next levels of detail, until we arrive at the lowest level, where we finally get to see single activities. All in all, there are some 150 diagrams in our process model. The ITIL Process Map is, for now, available in English and German for a number of different platforms, such as Visio, iGraphics or Eris. So you can get the ITIL model, for instance, as Visio diagrams or as a complete Eris process model. The contents are always the same. Since a lot of people use Visio, we're now going to have a look at the ITIL Process Map for Visio. I hope you're now able to see my Visio application window and the top-level diagram depicting the ITIL service lifecycle. We zoom in a little, we can see familiar processes from ITIL, like service strategy, service design, service transition, service operation, and continuous service improvement. Although this diagram is very high level, we can already see here that we use two types of shapes in these diagrams. And these shapes are aligned with BPMN, or Business Process Model and Notation, a standard that is often used these days for documenting business processes. The green shapes represent processes, and the orange shapes represent data or information objects. And we use the information objects to show the information flows between the processes. That's a very important principle in our product, because we want to show not only what processes are there, but also how the processes cooperate. Here, for example, we have the service transition process, where we create new services and possibly also create some new infrastructure. From here, we get current configuration information as an output, which is stored in the CMDB. And this configuration information is then passed along as an input to service operation. Obviously, in service operation, we need configuration information. We need to know, for example, what is installed where, in order to resolve incidents and problems. So, in this way, by showing the information flows between the processes, we want to explain in these diagrams how ITIL works. Of course, this is a high level of detail, but now, if we want to know in more detail, say, how things work in service operation, we can take a link. And taking a link can be done in two ways. It depends a bit on what version of Visio you use. In every version, even in the older ones, you can right-click on the shape, and then you'll find the link in the context menu. In the more recent versions, you can also hold down the Control key. See, that makes my cursor change. And then you can click on the shape to activate the link. That takes us down to the second level of detail, where we get to see more about service operation. I'll zoom in a second, but let me explain first that on these diagrams you always get to see the inputs at the left. So here at the left you can see the other ITIL processes and the inputs they send into service operation. At the right we have the outputs from service operation and where they go to, and in the middle we have processes from service operation, like event management, incident and problem management. Again, we show information flows in the diagrams to explain how things work. For example, the incident management process sends all incidents to problem management. There, the problem manager will analyze the incidents and maybe he is able to provide workarounds. And these workarounds are then being sent back into incident management, where they help with the resolution of future incidents. Now from here we can go down further, say into incident management. And this takes us down to the third level of detail, where again we get to see inputs on the left and outputs on the right. And in the center we now have processes from incident management. As we can see, incident management starts with a process for logging and categorizing incidents. And then we have processes for resolving major incidents and for resolving incidents in first level support. If we can't do anything about an incident in first level support, then it goes on to second level support. And however the incidents are being resolved, all of them end up down here in a process for formally evaluating and closing the incidents. Here we would check, for example, if the user is happy or if the steps for resolving the incidents are all recorded. And if everything looks fine, we would formally close the incident. Now from here we can go down once more to the lowest level of detail. For instance, if we want to know precisely how incidents are being resolved in first level support. Down here we finally get to see single activities. You can see them at the bottom inside of the swim lane. But let's first zoom in on the top area of this diagram, where first of all we get to see a complete account of all the inputs required for this process and where they come from. Then in the middle we have the process itself. This is the process described in more detail on this diagram. And still a bit further to the right we have all the outputs from the process and where they go to. In the top right hand corner we have the superior processes. So here we can always see where we are. Right now we are inside of incident management, which is a part of service operation, and that's of course underneath the top level diagram. So using these links we can go up again in the hierarchy of details. For example, back to the overview diagram of incident management, and then again into the sub-process diagram. Now let's move to the bottom part of this diagram, where we get to see activities in a swim lane. And also for the first time we see a yellow shape, which represents a role in our process model. In this case, the role of first level support. Probably it is almost self-explanatory what the diagram here tries to tell us. It says that first level support should first carry out an initial analysis, then do a few things in parallel, like checking known errors and workarounds, or searching existing incident and problem records. Whenever there was not enough space in the green activity shape, we added some notes below, simply to make it clear in every case what needs to happen. Then, when these activities are complete, a decision needs to be taken. A decision whether we can resolve the incident directly here in first level support or not. And that decision has a number of possible outcomes. It could be that we cannot resolve the incident, and then it must be transferred to second level support. The second possibility would be we can actually resolve the root cause of this incident. This would be ideal. If we can't resolve the root cause, then maybe we have a workaround at hand, or an idea for a new workaround. If that's the case, we would document the new workaround and apply it, and so on until the process ends here at the right-hand side with two different end events. So there are two possibilities for this process to end. The first possibility would be the incident has been resolved, either by applying a workaround or by resolving the root cause. And the second possibility is we could not resolve the incident, but we've passed it on to second level support. And now, if you want to know how does this go on from here, how does this go on in second level support, you would look into the upper part of the diagram, where you have the incident record being sent to the second level support process. And then, of course, using this link, you would be able to jump directly into the subsequent process, where you can see how things go on in second level support. So, using these links, you can jump directly into preceding or subsequent processes on the same level of detail. And that means you don't have to go up and down in the hierarchy of details all the time, but wherever you see a green activity shape, there is a link behind it taking you to a process diagram. And this was the first part of my presentation. I wanted to show you how we navigate in the process model and what kind of detail you can expect to find in our product. Let's now take a closer look at some of the shapes we use in the diagrams, namely the process and the data object shapes. And I'm also going to show you the document templates that come with the ITIL Process Map. If I click on the process shape like this, and if we then look at the shape data window at the right-hand side of my screen, you can see that for such shapes we've defined a number of attributes, or shape data fields as they are called in Visio. A process shape thus does not only have a name, it also has a brief description, a reference number, we say what higher level process it belongs to, it has a unique ID, and a status value. Status values can be handy if you introduce ITIL step by step. If, say, a process is not yet active, but in the planning stage, you can enter in planning here, and as you can see, this makes the shape turn gray. So, by entering anything different than active in here, you can gray out a process, and if you put in active again, this makes the shape turn green again. So, the status values can be handy if you introduce ITIL processes step by step. The same applies to data objects, like the incident record here. An incident record also has a name and a brief description here in the shape data fields, and it also has a status value, so you could also gray out data objects using the status value. Of course, it's good to have a short description of the incident record readily available here at the right-hand side in the shape data window. But then a lot more can be said about an incident record. And that's why the incident record shape has a link to a checklist. If we open the checklist, you will be able to see what it is good for. It describes the typical structure of the data we would expect to find in an incident record. There are some 100 checklists of this type included in our product, and apart from being descriptions or definitions of the different documents we use in the process model, you can in many cases also use the checklists as document templates. Maybe not so much here in this case, because incident records are usually stored in databases. But suppose you need to create the service level agreements for your organization. In that case, you can use the checklist for the SLA as a document template or starting point and adapt it to the needs of your organization. So much about the checklists. Let's close this again and go back to Visio. Because next I would like to show you the RACI metrics, which is also included in the ITIL Process Map. We've seen already that there is some responsibility information in the diagrams. Down here in the swim lane, for example, we say that first level support has a responsibility in the process. A responsibility for performing a couple of activities. Up at the top left, we also indicate the process owner. In this case, the process owner is the incident manager, which means the incident manager should ensure that the process is running well. So we have this kind of responsibility information in the diagrams, but there is also a summary of such information in the form of a complete RACI matrix. Our RACI matrix comes in the form of an Excel table, and if we zoom in a little, we see that in the top row, our matrix, as any RACI matrix, contains all the ITIL roles. And down here at the left, we have all the ITIL processes. In the middle of the matrix, we use the familiar abbreviations from the RACI model to indicate levels of responsibility. If we scroll down a little to the process we've seen in Visio before, and then if we look into the matrix, we can see an R for first level support and an A for the incident manager. So this reflects exactly the information from the Visio diagrams. If you want to know what these abbreviations stand for, you can look into the legend on a separate page. It's also easy to make changes in the matrix, because behind every cell there is a tiny drop-down list with the available entries. But a word of caution is in order here. If you make a change in the matrix, this obviously will not change anything in the Visio diagrams. So you always have to ensure that the Visio diagrams and the matrix are kept in sync. Now, this matrix is a nice summary of responsibilities, but you can also use it for navigating the process model, starting from a role perspective. Suppose you are the change manager. Then you could switch on a filter and select the responsibilities you want to see. If you apply the filter, this will narrow down the matrix to only the relevant processes for the change manager. And then, because the process names at the left are equipped with links, you can click on a process name to open a Visio diagram. Now it pops up down here. And then if we zoom in a little, we can see precisely what is the responsibility of the change manager here in the process. In this way, you can use the RACI matrix for navigating the process model, starting out with a specific role. And then you can open Visio diagrams directly from here. And this is what I wanted to show about the RACI matrix. Let's now close the matrix and go back to Visio, because as a next step, I want to explain how you can go about modifying these process diagrams. Probably that is something you will want to do. In fact, most of our customers change these diagrams. They say that the diagrams are fine, but they reflect kind of an ideal world, and they need to do things a bit differently. Which is fine, because ITIL, after all, is not a standard, but a set of recommendations. So nobody would expect you to implement these processes to the letter. Instead, you can adapt them to the needs of your organization. My first message here is that you can do to these diagrams whatever is possible in Visio. There are no locks whatsoever in these diagrams. You can add any type of shape that is available. But we provide a number of tools that will help you with keeping a consistent look and feel of these diagrams. First, there is a collection of master shapes. You can see them down here in my document stencil. These are the shapes we used ourselves when creating the original diagrams. But now you can also use them if you need to add, say, an additional activity. In that case, you can drag an activity shape from the document stencil onto the diagram. Then adjust the sequence flow a bit, and we also need an additional sequence flow. And then you can enter some description into the task. You can of course also change existing tasks or notes below the tasks, or you can delete what you don't need. There are no limits whatsoever. The nice thing about using master shapes is that they maintain a link between the shapes created based on the master shape and the master shape itself. And that has a big advantage if, for example, you want to change the layout of particular shapes. Then you can open the master shape, and for demonstration purposes, let's now change the background color of this shape. Then let's close the master, and as you can see, this changes the background color of all the task shapes. So if you use master shapes, you can change the layout of a number of shapes in one single place. There's no need to adapt every shape individually. This was simple enough because the shapes down here typically occur only once in the whole process model. And that's why we enter descriptions directly here in the shapes. Things are a bit different up here, where we have processes and data objects. As we've seen before, a process shape carries a link to a process diagram, and it also has some descriptive information in the shape data fields. And the same applies to data objects. They also have a link to a checklist, and they also have some additional information in the shape data fields. Now, as you can imagine, a process like this one is used in many diagrams. And whenever it's used, it needs to have the correct link and the correct descriptive information. That would mean we would need to add such information like hyperlinks and descriptions manually every time we use the process. Obviously, that would be a lot of work. So a lot speaks for having a central repository with things like processes and data objects and also roles. Such a repository comes with the ITIL Process Map, and also kind of a macro that we can use for picking objects from the repository and inserting them into the Visio diagrams. If you install the add-in, you will get a couple of new commands up here in the Add-ins tab. And now, with the repository and the add-in, you can do the following. You can create a fresh process shape. This is a blank process shape. It has no link yet, therefore we cannot see a plus sign, and it has no useful information in the shape data fields. And now we click on the Select command up here in the Add-ins tab and get a list of all the processes from the repository. We can now enter a search pattern and select a process from the list, and this will set the process name, the link behind the process, and also the descriptive information in the shape data fields. The same also works for data objects. We can create a new data object shape and then click on Select. This will bring up not a list of the processes but of the data objects defined in the repository. Again, we can select one from the list, and that will set the name of the object, the link to the checklist, and the descriptive information. In case you're interested, we can now have a quick look at the repository, which is an Excel file with a couple of simple tables. Here, for example, we have the process table. In this table, every process is defined in one row, and every row starts with a unique ID. Then we have a couple of cells with the process properties, such as the reference number, the process name, the description, the next higher level process, and the status value. Of course, these properties are stored in Visio in the shape data fields. And then we also define in the repository the link to the correct process diagram. Of course, you can also change the repository, just as you can change the Visio diagrams. For example, you can go down to the end of the table and insert an additional row, which amounts to adding a new process to the repository. You would start by entering a new unique ID, then you put in some reference number, process name, or a description. We don't have to fill in every field, but we say the process is in planning. And if we don't have a process diagram yet, we leave the link fields empty. Now we save the repository and close it and go back to Visio. And here back in Visio, we again create a fresh process shape. Then we click on Select to bring up the list of processes and search for the new process. Now here it is, and we click on OK to set the process name. As you can see, the process shape is shown in gray because we set the status to in planning. And also there is no plus sign in the process shape because we didn't enter any link information. So we have a simple mechanism here for managing objects in a repository and then inserting such objects easily into the Visio diagrams. Of course, we also need a way of updating the shapes if changes happened in the repository. This can be done in two ways. First, you can select a couple of shapes in the diagram and then use the refresh command. This will update the selected shapes with current information from the repository. Or you can also click on Refresh File if there are many changes in the repository. And this will update all the shapes in the currently open Visio file. And that's what I wanted to tell you about modifying the process diagrams and using the repository. We cannot cover all the details here, but then the ITIL Process Map contains a user manual with further information. So much about the ITIL Process Map. We think it's a very good tool for understanding ITIL and for designing ITIL-aligned processes in your organization. If your goal is to get certified against ISO 20000, we also offer an additional component that is called the ITIL ISO 20000 Bridge. The idea behind the bridge is to use ITIL processes for fulfilling the ISO 20000 requirements. That's possible because ITIL and ISO 20000 have many principles in common. The first page of the bridge contains links to further diagrams and documents. First up here, at the top right, we have a link to the original ISO 20000 document. In case you don't know ISO 20000 so well, we're going to have a quick look. ISO 20000 comes in the form of a PDF and contains a long list of requirements. If we scroll down a little to service level management and then zoom in a bit, we can see a typical example. The service provider shall agree the services to be delivered with the customer. In order to comply with the standard, you have to fulfill all these requirements. But then ISO 20000 will not tell you precisely how you can go about fulfilling the requirements. And that's where the ITIL ISO 20000 Bridge comes into the picture, because it provides advice on fulfilling these requirements. The bridge has the same structure as the ISO 20000 standard. For example, there is a section on service level management. For each section we have a diagram, and if we open it and if we zoom in a little, then we can see that at the left we have a column with requirements. So in these diagrams you will find the complete set of requirements that must be fulfilled. Then, and that's the important point here, next to every requirement we say what ITIL process or processes should be in place to fulfill the requirement. Of course, these processes are from the ITIL Process Map. So, if we click on a link, we can open a process diagram where we get a detailed explanation of the process in question. And that means for every single requirement, you get specific advice on how to fulfill it. Next to the processes, we also show the related evidence that should be in place. Think of related evidence as kind of proof that a process does not only exist on paper. This is usually checked during an ISO 20000 certification audit. And if you are able to show a couple of documents, such as service agreements, then usually your auditor will be satisfied. Of course, also for the related evidence, we provide specific advice in the form of checklists. We've seen the checklists before as part of the ITIL Process Map. They explain the typical contents of such documents, and they can also be used as templates. And then if we move to the right, we also have a column where you can add notes. For example, to explain specifically how you fulfill a certain requirement. And finally, if we move to the left again, we have a couple of circles here. And these circles can be used for color coding the requirements. Green, for example, could mean that a requirement is already fulfilled, and orange may signal that something still needs to be done about a requirement. In this way, you can use these diagrams as kind of a dashboard as you prepare for the certification audit. So much about the ITIL ISO 20000 bridge. Now, before we finish, I have a few more slides where I would like to summarize what our offer includes. We've seen already the reference process diagrams. There are some 156 of them in 4 levels of detail. And we also covered the checklists or document templates. In addition, our product contains some documentation. These are PDF documents, and we are not going to open them here because that would take too long and it would also be a bit boring. But at least I'd like to mention that we include an ITIL implementation guide. This explains how ITIL-aligned processes can be implemented in a number of steps. And for every step it would say how the ITIL Process Map supports it. There's an introduction to ITIL, which is not meant to replace the official ITIL publications. But we explain in this document how we created the ITIL process model based on the ITIL books. The user manual tells you a bit more about the technical aspects of the Visio diagrams and also of the repository feature. And last but not least, there is a collection of key performance indicators. In this document, you will typically find a number of commonly used KPIs for every ITIL main process. If you purchase a license, you will also benefit from what I like to call personal and friendly support. We are small and you will be able to speak to us directly if, for instance, you need help with adapting the Visio diagrams. And that's what I wanted to present today. If you have any questions, please get in touch with us. On our website you will find a contact form and also our complete contact information. And we also offer a free ITIL Wiki. In the Wiki you will find everything you need to familiarize yourself with ITIL or service management best practice in general. Thanks for watching and have a good day.